In the world of Kaiju number 8, the beasts that are known as Kaiju, they have rewritten the laws as to who is at the top of the food chain. It is no longer humans, but instead Kaiju sit at the very top as the apex predators of this world, in particular the Kaiju who are so powerful that they have numbers assigned to them. And in the cases of some, like Kaiju number 6, they unleash so much damage that several years afterwards, the world is still mentally shattered from the rampage before it was defeated. But the brave men and women who battle these Kaiju are the ones who make up the defense force, using a range of different weapons and suits made for the sole purpose of slaying Kaiju and restoring balance to the world by putting humans back at the top and preventing humans from going extinct. Which is why in today's newest Kaiju number 8 video, we're going to be breaking down everything you need to know about the members of the 3rd division, the division that Kafka, the series protagonist, originally started out during the events of season number 1 of the anime, and break down their characters, their powers, and their history. As always, this video will contain some spoilers, but I'll keep it limited to only what you need to know in order to fully understand the characters. Finally, due to some characters like Kafka and Kikoru having already been covered extensively in every numbers weapon user and every identified Kaiju, I will keep those sections, those characters, very brief in order to not overlap some of the previous information that we mentioned in those other videos here on the channel. Now, the 3rd division is led by Mina Ashiro, someone who many people believe has what it takes to be a future Defense Force commander, and her second in command is Soshiro Hoshina, also possesses the potential to rise up to that status despite the different way he has of combating Kaiju compared to the others in his division. It's for that reason it's only right we start off with both of those members, and then we'll work our way through the officers and the platoon leaders, and we'll finish off with Kafka. Starting off with Mina Ashiro, she is the captain of the Defense Force and the childhood friend of the series protagonist Kafka. She is equally beautiful as she is deadly. Oftentimes you see her and she's very serious, she's driven and laser focused. As an individual, something you'd expect nothing less of from someone that many people believe is a future Defense Force commander. She possesses a strong passion and an intense hatred to eradicate every Kaiju in existence, which would make you immediately think of the issues that might bring up since Kafka is a Kaiju now. But she has a very vulnerable soft spot for Kafka, and they have a rather interesting relationship that goes back to childhood. While she was initially upset with him for failing to keep his promise to always be at her side, she still wishes nothing but the best for him, even after the big revelation comes out that he was Kaiju number 8, and she holds near and dear to her heart their childhood experiences that they shared together. It's one of the many signs that we see in the series that shows that beneath that super hard exterior, we have someone who genuinely cares about others, and in battle, you'll see her going out of her way to make sure that those she's fighting with are not injured, at least to the best of her ability to do so, since in that line of work it's a tall task to prevent someone from dying in battle. She mitigates the risk for subordinates as much as possible, the very traits that you would be on the lookout for a leader. We see her praise people whenever it's needed and building them up as it's required as well. However, deep within her and behind that smile of hers, who is still seen, she is still someone we can see at times as being worn down by her insecurity, a fear of failing, and by failing, she knows that as a leader, it could mean some of her comrades don't make it home that day, that the ones who died under her command will have their sacrifices in the war against the Kaiju made meaningless, and she fears losing the trust of her comrades and the civilians she's meant to protect. However, this is what drives her to work so hard to ensure that she does her best in the battle situations. In that regard, she's a lot like Kikoru Shinomiya. She is known in universe as being one of the strongest captains in the Defense Force, having killed a massive number of Kaiju during her time, and by a massive number I mean that number is well within the 100s. We've seen that her skill and her power went on full display in a way where she is very easily and single-handedly taken down giant Kaiju without any help, and the Director General has directly scaled her over the prodigy Genrumi in battle, giving her praise for her high proficiency in handling large-sized weapons. The praise for her character is further laid out when you realize that there's a strong belief that exists in the universe that had she been around in the battle with Kaiju number 6, the number of casualties and the scale of damage done in that historic battle, it could have been cut down over 66%, coming in at just under 1/3 of the damage because she is that much of a monster in battle. All it took was one look from General Shinomiya to realize that Mina, she was something special, viewing her as a potential tide changer in the war against the Kaiju, and even the series antagonist Kaiju number 9 is very wary of her strength, viewing her as a true threat and someone worthy of defeating, and also simultaneously respecting her power. As of this recording, it's not been revealed if she has a numbers weapon or not, but the fact that she gets all this high praise from multiple accomplished characters all on her own without a numbers weapon being shown, it just shows you how much of a monster this young beauty is. When she uses her combat suit that's made by Izumo Tech, she can draw 96% of its power, which allows for her to use that monster strength and speed at superhuman levels, giving her the speed and reflexes to dodge attacks from Kaiju number 9 in battle, which is insane given how strong Kaiju number 9 is. She is one of the best marksmen that we have in the defense force, being called the strongest super giant class killer, and it's because of that giant cannon that she lugs around in battle, which packs Kaiju killing force with it. When she uses her tiger to stabilize her positioning, her accuracy when firing off that cannon, it goes up drastically. She is without any debate one of the most accurate marksmen in the entire defense force. As we've seen in the battles with Kaiju number 10, Kaiju number 14, she is one hell of a combatant. It doesn't matter that these are numbered Kaiju that have insane fortitude levels. She's more than capable enough to get a win in a lot of those instances. Whether it be a handgun or a rifle or her massive railgun, she's going to kill you whatever weapon is at her disposal. After Kikoru, Shinomiya, and Kaiju number 9, she is hands down one of my favorite characters in Kaiju number 8. Up next, we have the vice captain of the 3rd Division, Soshiro Hoshina. He's the prodigy talent, sadly born in the wrong era. In this world where Kaiju reign supreme, the use of a sword in combat when everyone else is lugging around these monstrous weapons like Mina, it is something that stands out potentially in a lot of people's eyes. It's not a good thing, but there's a reason this mad lad uses a sword in battle. He's just that damn good swinging a sword. When it comes to his swordsmanship, his skills are flat out stated to be so insane that had he been born back in the Edo period of Japan, he would have easily been considered a prodigy. You'll oftentimes see him being super laid back and smiling and even making jokes with others, primarily at Kafka's expense, but when he goes into battle, he is a beast, and behind all those jokes, those are the eyes of someone very perceptive and a very intelligent individual. He was the first one to figure out that Kafka was Kaiju number 8, and that was the reason he allowed him into the defense force, though it was also because he just found it hilarious that Kafka could only draw out so little of his combat suit. Killing Kaiju and doing so with his sword, it is a huge part of his desire to live, and he is insanely loyal to his captain Mina Ashiro. And after he gets confirmation that Kafka is Kaiju number 8, he goes out of his way to publicly show his support and thank him in order to ensure that his subordinates don't hold a grudge against Kafka. We'll oftentimes see him training like a madman, honing his swordsmanship skills, and at times replaying the battle with Kaiju number 8 and other Kaiju in his mind as a form of visualization training while he's honing his swordsmanship skills, which that is what makes him so deadly. Anyone can be a good fighter if they train, but people like him who take lessons and obsess both from their victories and their losses and use them as a way to improve, they are the truly scary ones because their ceiling is always going to be on a sliding scale. During his battle with Kaiju number 12, and just when it seems like he was about to be defeated, the bond that he formed with Kaiju number 10, a shaky bond at the start, and the balance that they strike with one another, where he realizes that he enjoys the thrill of battle just like Kaiju number 10, it allows him to overpower the perfected version of Kaiju number 10, which was known as Kaiju number 12. When we did see him battle Kaiju number 10, he did so much of a job that Kaiju number 10 was left with a strong impression of Soshiro. When he's using his combat suit, he can draw out 92% of his power, but when he uses his numbers weapon, he can pull out a full 100% as of now of this recording. Superhuman speed and strength, they are an understatement. With his swords, he's able to break through the skin of number Kaiju. He was able to slice up Kaiju number 10 despite having taken heavy damage, and even in his base without his combat suit, he's got freakishly strong physical power, as we see when he's training Kafka. In combat speed, we see him able to blitz and dodge attacks from superpowered number Kaiju like Kaiju number 10 and Kaiju number 12, taking full-on hits from Kaiju number 10 and literally being the smiling mad lad after the fact because he was ready to get back up for more smoke, get back up, and continue fighting. Next up, we have Reno Ichikawa. He started out the story working at Monster Sweeper Inc. alongside the series protagonist Kafka, and after seeing his friend become a Kaiju, he and Kafka, they joined the defense force as a part of the 3rd Division. When we first meet him, his personality, it can be a bit subjective. You either really like him or you're not that high on him at all. It really comes down to how you view his choice to be antagonistic towards Kafka when it comes to him giving up on his dream to join join the defense force, but as you'll see later on, he is incredibly supportive of Kafka, and we see a strong moral character at play with them, like his interactions with Furuhashi, someone who considered Reno as being a rival, and still maintain a decent level of respect towards him, and still was able to keep putting his safety at the top of the things he needed to do. He possesses a strong desire to grow stronger, to help and support his comrades, and he more than once in the series has found himself pushing past his limits to help his comrades, especially once he gets his numbers weapon. He's got enough talent that characters like Soshiro Hoshina, they have high expectations of him to reach the status of a captain one day, and he's even been called a prodigy by others. In battle, he's no joke either, being able to hold off Kaiju number 9 briefly, despite Kaiju number 9 being extremely powerful. Him using numbers weapon 6, it should not be looked down upon either, because it was the second strongest Kaiju in the history of Kaiju, and before Kafka showed up, it was the strongest Kaiju. And the cryokinesis powers that it has is nothing to turn your nose up at, because they can be absolutely broken. We've seen him use the cryokinesis in order to make footholds in battle. We've seen him freeze an entire throng of Kaiju. We've seen him take down Kaiju on his own, and he's even broken through his limits at the expense of his own physical well-being in battle when wearing the suit. There are moments in the story where he's just as much of a danger to himself as he is the Kaiju that he's fighting. When he uses his numbers weapon, he was able to draw out 51% of his power upon the last confirmation, though it is very strongly implied in the time since chapter 61 that he's drawing out a lot more power now, but as of this recording, we don't have a concrete quantifiable number. In battle, we've seen that he's got insanely high combat speed. He was able to dodge attacks by Kaiju number 9, get severely amped up when he's using his numbers weapon. We've seen him do pretty decent in the battle against Kaiju number 9, but his true strength again comes from his numbers weapon, which allows him to freeze whatever it is that he's touching. Despite him drawing out less of Kaiju number 6's power compared to Kikoru Shinomiya, his growth rate is nothing less than a prodigy, already improving at a rate that was faster than Kikoru Shinomiya, who is a monster prodigy in her own right when it comes to talent, which it's only right that we do Kikoru Shinomiya next. Like previously stated, since we've already covered her character pretty extensively here on the channel in a few videos, we're going to keep this meaty, but we're also going to keep it brief for her character so you can get a full picture of the character while also not repeating a lot of what we've done before. So as the daughter of two famous Kaiju slayers, she was expected at an early age to be a capable defense force member, and part of her character journey is both seeking the acknowledgement of her father, who was harder on her following the death of her mother, but it's also her desire to be her own person and break out of the shadow of her deceased mother, while also living up to and proving worthy of the expectations that are placed onto her. As you've seen by now, those expectations are not easy to escape from people who knew her mother, comparing her to her mom due to their similar appearance, and even the manner in which she fights brings up the comparisons, and even the Kaiju that her numbers weapon is made of, it projects memories of her mother at times when she's wearing the suit. These high expectations provide both incentive to train to grow stronger as well as just to train harder, but they also provide a weakness for her due to the insecurity that it causes her. Though she does come across at times like a bit of a tsundere, as we've seen when she's around Kafka and her interactions with him, she does care about him and she does care about her comrades. At one point, she goes as far as to protect his secret that he's Kaiju number 8, showed genuine concern for him when General Director Shinomiya was battling Kafka. She is going out of her way to uplift his spirits at times, and she pushes him when Kafka needs to be pushed. Having lost both of her parents in such a short period of time in her very short life itself, there is a trauma there for her, which later gets exploited in her battle with Kaiju number 15, but it's because of this battle she's able to put to rest a bulk of her insecurities, and even thanks Kaiju number 15 because their battle was what she needed to move forward, both as a warrior, shoring up her weaknesses, but also as a person before Kaiju number 15 was taken down. Early on in the series, we see that her skill level, it is off the charts, being able to take out a throng of Kaiju on her own, not just low level Kaiju, but also strong Kaiju that had a fortitude level of 7.0 and is skilled enough to hold her own in a sparring match against Gendarumi. In her battle with Kaiju number 15, she was able to fight off 15 in a very respectable manner. Part of her skill comes, yes, from her own natural talent, but also the fact that she sees the ghost of her mother in combat, which allows her to mimic the movement, so that puts her at a captain class when she mimics those moves. Using her numbers weapon, she can pull out a very respectable and highly impressive 94% of its power, putting her as the highest non-captain percentage advantage of anyone in the defense force. When using numbers weapons 4, she can move at insanely high speeds, but she is also skilled enough in battle that she is allowed to carry her own personal weapon into battle, something that is typically reserved for elites. She is a jack of all trades when it comes to fighting because she can use guns as well as swords and her mighty axe whenever she's in a fight. Up next we have Furuhashi, the man that has a one-sided rivalry with Reno Ichikawa. This hot-blooded badass has enough pride that it might as well be considered its own superpower. He doesn't care for being viewed as being inferior to others, and he hates losing, which drives him to grow stronger and improve in a way that is beyond those that he knows is stronger than him. It's a bit headstrong, but I personally like it since there's nothing wrong with aiming to surpass those who are clearly ahead of you. However, for all the bluster that you'll see, he's also got an inferiority complex, especially towards those in the defense force who are improving at a rate much faster than him. He's very self-aware of his own weaknesses, which while at times it is admirable and is a requirement for someone who is trying to go stronger, as we see, it can at times be to his detriment to be as headstrong as he is. While he doesn't have a numbers weapon, he is someone who is one of the better rookies from his class. When he first uses his combat suit, he can draw up 14% of his power, and after 2 months of hard training, he gets up to 20%, and later on, he can get his combat suit up to 42%, and currently in the manga, he can draw 88% of his combat suit. He is more than once in the series is someone that has shown that despite his inferiority complex, he has the potential to be an amazing soldier, evident by the fact that when he does grow, it seems like he's growing in chunks, a lot like that meme where you see that person that's skipping several stairs when they're walking up a staircase. He's improved quite a bit since he briefly battled Kaiju number 9 early on in the series. When he transfers from the 3rd division to the 4th division, we see that this mad lad has a shotgun that fires off electrified shells in order to shoot down Kaiju. Next up, we have Konomi, the operations leader for the 3rd division. Based on what we've seen from her, she's super professional, not caring for how unprofessional the behavior is of her vice captain Soshiro Hoshina, but she is also someone who has a big heart and concern for her comrades, and she is very keen in terms of her observation skills whenever she needs to be, grabbing hold of the situation in battle and offering up support via those brainy analytical skills she possesses. As operation leader, she isn't expected to go into battle and slay Kaiju. Instead, she breaks down the situation for those who are in the field, and she supports them from afar, pointing out information that will be needed to ensure everyone's survival and doing everything within her power to ensure victory for those in the 3rd division. A great example of this is how she was able to push through the shock that she saw when Soshiro and Kaiju number 12 are battling, and break down the fact that Kaiju number 12 was built specifically to take down Soshiro because he had weapons number 10. Next up, we have Toma Takanashi, another who doesn't have a numbers weapon, but what little we do know is that he has extreme loyalty to Division 3 and was one of the people who was still willing to thank Kafka for saving his life back at the base. There isn't anything of real note about his character just yet, while as of this recording, he seems to be more of a stock character like the next few we're going to go over. As with any long-running series, this can always change, and if it does, we'll make an updated version of this video when the series finally ends. We now move on to Hakua Igarashi, another officer in the 3rd division who, as you've caught from watching the anime, is pretty loud enough that Asta from Black Clover might tell her to tone it down a few levels, but she's also super friendly with female officers. She doesn't have a numbers weapon, and for the most part, she's mostly unknown, but what we do know is that her skill with the sword has been taken note of by the journalists who were watching her in the past. Given this lack of information, we'll move on to the next officer in the division. Akari is next, and she is a former member of the health committee. Compared to Shinomiya and Igarashi, she is more reserved in personality and is just a hard worker in general who has a blue chip mentality to put her best foot forward whenever possible. When in battle, she can use a rifle if need be, but her true skill is in medical stuff, and while she isn't terrible at combat, she isn't a heavy hitter like someone like Kikoru Shinomiya. For now, we'll move through the next couple of officers before moving on to the platoon leaders and then Kafka. Aoi is our next officer. When we see him, he's pretty serious and he is always working harder to try and surpass those who are in front of him, which at times it can cause him to hide his emotions. Before joining the Defense Force, he was viewed as being an elite rising star in the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, but moved to the Defense Force in order to get a greater challenge. As of right now, he's currently able to use 25% of his combat suit, and very early on in the series, he set his eyes on Shinomiya, using her as a target to keep his eyes on because of her very clear prodigy skill. Izumo rounds out the rest of the officers. He's sharp, he's cunning, but also very relaxed and level-headed, whereas some of his peers, they can be a bit strong-willed and opinionated. He's someone who has a very much cool head, but he's also observant and watches for those who he identifies as rivals to push himself to get stronger, which he does by making Shinomiya and Aoi his rivals. He's super smart, being the valedictorian from the Tokyo Neutralization University, and he can raise his combat suit's power to 36%. After moving to the 2nd Division, his specialized weapon is a bow and arrow, which he's extremely proficient at due to his training. Now we'll move on to the platoon leaders and then go to our lovable goofball Kafka. The 3rd Division has 5 platoon leaders. The first is the hot-tempered and ever so loud Ebina, who isn't above being confrontational or speaking his mind, but for as brash as he can be, he can also admit when someone is skilled and doing a good job. In battle, we see him guide his men in the battle against the lizard type Kaiju and be very thorough in his planning and the orders that he gives his subordinates, taking into careful consideration what each of the officers that he's commanding has specialties in and adjusting his plans as need be. He's very quick thinking and able to come up with the best strategies for the most effective victories. Ryo is the next platoon leader. He's got a loud personality and he takes his job title very seriously and is someone that the vice captain Soshiro Hoshina places a lot of trust in for his specific duties depending on the situation itself. He's not the strategic genius that Ebina is, but he is someone who can hold his own in a fight and able to guide his men to victory. Itakura is our next platoon leader who has that blue chip mentality of just showing up every day, putting in the work to do his job in an effective way. As platoon leader, he's able to take on multiple kaiju on his own and has remarkable leadership skills. Outside of that, there's not too much else to say about his character. We move on to Tae Nakanoshima, and this pink-haired hottie is either someone who's going to be described as you as being an utter flirt or just downright thirsty, depending on how you view her, commenting on the attractiveness of the new recruits that are serving under her command. Outside of her being a bit of a flirt and having a skill and leadership to be a platoon leader, there's not much else known about her. The last platoon leader is Takao, the super serious platoon leader who is also the leader of the sniper team and is seriously skilled when it comes to long range shooting. Finally, we have Kafka, the series protagonist. Despite him being in his early 30s, Kafka is pretty childish in how he handles a lot of things, but despite this, he is a very informed person when it comes to the bodies of kaiju due to the many years he spent cleaning up their corpses, following the battles of the Defense Force, and he's always willing to do what he can to help others. Despite him for many years not being able to make it into the Defense Force to support his friend Mina Ashiro, Kafka eventually does get into Division 3 to be alongside Mina Ashiro, who he wanted to fight alongside and be there with her. He takes great care in living up to the trust and expectations that people place onto his shoulders, but there are times, due to his failures that he's had in the past, where you see some of his insecurities on display, which is completely understandable. He's in his early 30s and he isn't where he thought he would be at this point in life, and he's a bit of a late bloomer in how he's chasing after his dream after such a long time, but he's seizing the opportunity with everything he has. Even though initially there was some disdain for himself due to getting this opportunity because he can transform into a kaiju, but it's when the much younger Shinomiya is encouraging him and supporting him, telling him to trust himself and his comrades in the Defense Force, that he begins to start turning a corner. The downside to his kaiju powers is that while they do give him that superhuman strength, is that each time he transforms into a kaiju for an extended period, he loses a part of himself, because the longer he transforms into a kaiju, the less of his human body remains. And as of right now, as of this recording of this video, there is no known way to reverse this effect. Yet in spite of this, we see him continue to use his power and overpower the numbered kaiju and be a thorn in the side of kaiju number 9, which is understandable given that after being unable to live his dream for such a long time, he's now able to do so, and he's making a difference in the war against the kaiju, in particular the numbered kaiju, which this video on the left breaks down all the numbered kaiju in the series, all 15 that have been identified, and over here on the right we have a video breaking down all the members of the 1st Division that Kafka transfers to after the events of season 1 of the anime. So if you want to learn more about Kafka's new squad, you want to click on that video.